Chapter 4. Sinya. When they went back home, Sinya sat on a wooden stool at an oak round table with Dottie, Abigail and Talon. Leroy and William each picked up a round instrument with strings running down a long neck. They sat on the bench. Sharp claws extended out of their fingernails, and they picked at the strings at the round base while their other hand moved up and down the neck. "You don't need to pick those noisemakers up every chance you get," Carla told them. Leroy looked up. "Jasper calls them string guitars," Sinya finished. "You know about these string machines?" William asked. "My dad has one. At home it's called a guitar. I try to play but not very good." "Our dad invented them," Talon said. "I doubt that," Sinya said. "He did," Talon shot at him. "He also invented the lights and running water. My dad builds spaceships." "No such things," Abigail said. "Yes there is. Guess you don't have them. Ships are just myths." Sinya opened his mouth again when Ellen cut in. "That's enough, children. On your planet you don't float, do you?" Leroy asked. "On the vision box, we don't see humans flying." "Stacia says I have an active imagination," he thought. "No. We do just fine above ground. If we want to fly, we have vehicles called airplanes that take us through the sky." Dottie's soft blue eyes were fixed on Sinya while leaning on the kitchen table. "Let's see your claws." Sinya shook his head. "Why aren't I waking up yet?" he wondered. "Don't you have claws?" Ellen and Carla were setting the table with plates for lunch. For the first time, Sinya really noticed his surroundings. The roof was smooth except for the hole they used for the entrance. The walls were made of solid rock. The living area and kitchen ran together, unlike his house where a wall divides the two. "Does everyone live underground?" he asked. Dottie's eyes sparkled bright. "And what do you live in? What is it like where you come from? Arth was it?" she asked garrulously. Her face was just inches away. He scooted back. Dottie played with Sinya's hands. Her own hands were covered with fur but shaped just like his. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something slithering on the ground behind Dottie, and he sprang to his feet. Sinya gasped when he saw what looked to be a snake strike Dottie. She spun to look at her mother. "What?" she asked, rubbing her bottom. "You know what?" Carla's tail retracted up to its normal size. "Ellen has asked you to stop poking at him." "Are you okay?" Ellen asked. "What was that?" Sinya asked. "Just my tail," Carla said. "She doesn't need to be poking at you." Sinya sat down. "I thought it was a snake." "What's a snake?" Abigail asked. "On Earth it's an animal that slithers on the ground." "I remember seeing those on the vision box," Abigail said. "What is Earth like?" Dottie asked. "It's called Earth. We live in round houses above ground. In big cities with cars and roads. Nothing like this." "What are these cars?" Leroy asked. "Sounds sweet." "Whatever they are." How to explain, he wondered. They look like big metal boxes that hover on the ground. They're how we get around, so we don't have to walk anywhere. The children laughed. Ellen placed sandwiches on their plates. "So, anything coming back yet of how you got here?" Sinya thought and shook his head. "The only thing I remember is waking up here." "You don't remember how you got into the forest or how long you were there?" Ellen asked, getting some cups from the cupboard and taking a tea kettle and placing it over the fire on a spit. "Obviously a while." "I'm surprised the council didn't make him bathe right there," Abigail said, her nose twitching. Talon began to laugh, then stiffened when she saw her mother's sharp eyes narrow toward them both. "You would too if you were in a hole for so long." He began munching on his sandwich. His babysitter's words came to him. "One retort doesn't deserve another." "That was not very nice of either of you," Ellen said, raising an eyebrow at her two daughters. They both apologized. "Okay, you two." She looked at the two children on the bench. "Time to put the noisemakers away and eat." "Noisemakers?" Leroy asked. "They're called guitars." Putting it down, he stood along with his brother. I think I like that word better than string machine. My brothers and sisters are trying to start a live band, William said, taking his seat. It will be the first one on the planet. We got the idea from Vision Box. What's a Vision Box? He asked. William pointed to a square box that resembled a television. Funny. We have those too, but we call them TVs, Sinya said, then took a sip of some brown liquid that looked like cocoa, which was too hot. If this was a dream, this wouldn't have burned. Funny name, Abigail said. So on Earth, how many of you are there where you come from? Dottie asked. Do you all have so little fur? She ran her hand over his oily colored hair. It feels like fur. Dottie. She flinched, turning toward her mother's sharp voice. Dottie began eating. It's called Earth. It's not fur, it's hair, Sinya said. When they'd finished eating, Ellen and Carla took the kids' plates to a round bowl made of a sunken rock full of water. Sinya guessed they used it for their sink, seeing them place the plates within the basin. Speaking of playing, you want to get some practice time in, Abigail said. As the other children agreed, they stood and disappeared behind a curtain. Leroy and William picked up their instruments and trailed behind, leaving Sinya with their mothers. Finally I can eat, Sinya thought, picking up his sandwich. Talon poked her head through the curtain and asked, You're going to watch us, right, Mom? After Sinya's done with his meal, Ellen said. Once he was done, Ellen pulled back the curtain and led Sinya down the hall, while Carla followed. They walked on a carpet made of wax. It was a little bumpy at times due to piles of dirt not flattening. The walls were lined with wood paneling, except for a square hole in the wall. Music could be heard behind double doors at the end of the hall. Ellen pushed it open. The room they were in now was large. The children stood on a wooden platform with instruments in front of them. Leroy plucked the guitar, which was now plugged into a speaker, making it louder. William's tail tapped a square device before him. His tail tapped one area, and he used sticks to tap another area. A beat came out of built-in speakers. It sounded like a tap of a cymbal and a drum. Dottie stood behind a long, narrow device. Her fingers and tail moved across something that looks like a bunch of keys, reminding Sinya of a piano his grandma has in her house. Abigail played an instrument with holes. Her fingers moved up and down along these holes, causing a high pitch to squeal out. Her lips blew into a small hole at the top. Talon stood center stage holding a round device, singing into it softly. It too was plugged into a speaker. Ellen took Sinya onto her lap while sitting next to Carla on stools. Looking up, Sinya saw different colors of lights facing the children. Sinya focused on the song Talon sang. Now and then her sister would join in. I recognize this. Sinya looked at Ellen and said, My mom and dad listens to this song on the radio. How is it they know a song from my planet, he wondered. She wrapped her arms around him. His skin tickled from her furry arms. Stacia, my babysitter, said I always had a vivid imagination. But I'm not imagining this, am I? Sinya asked. No, and kissed him on the head, I'm afraid not. She jerked her head back in disgust, and Sinya wondered if she saw some bugs in his hair from laying in the dirt. Avi's right, you need a bath. She stood, taking Sinya's hand. She led him toward the doors until Talon's voice boomed through the speakers that stood on either side of the stage. You said you were going to watch, she whined into the mic. I'll be back. I'm going to bathe Sinya, Ellen continued through the doors. I think I could play better, Sinya whispered. They entered the square hole in the hallway. It looked like the one in the community. The basin he used to wash his hands in, a smaller hole in the ground next to that they used for a toilet. The only difference was that inches away a larger hole sat in the ground. The light illuminated on the brown water that filled the pit. What's that? Sinya asked, pointing to it. It's what we use to bathe in, Ellen said. We call it a bathtub. That's a good name for it, Carla said, standing in the doorway. I know it's not much to look at, but it's clean. Ellen touched Sinya's sweater. What are these called that you're wearing? She asked. My clothes, he asked. Do we need to take them off? She asked. Yeah. Sinya began pulling his sweater off when he stopped to look at Carla. There's no curtain on this like there was in the last one. We'll make sure no one else sees, and tomorrow I'll place a curtain up, Ellen said, helping Sinya out of his clothes and into the water. I've had dreams that seemed real before, but nothing like this. You'll find out it's not a dream after a few days, Carla said. After examining his clothes, Ellen took a bar of soap and applied it to a cloth, then began scrubbing Sinya. The water became colder and colder while Ellen and Carla talked. So is Jasper still not coming home for weeks on end? Carla asked. He's very busy inventing things, Ellen said. But he said he'd be home more to help look after Sinya and keep those that thinks he's dangerous away from him. I still don't understand how no one has seen a human here. Sinya chattered his teeth and crossed his arms. I'll get some warm water for you, Ellen said before going down the hall. Why would we see humans? Carla asked. The Elusan race and human race are both on Earth. Carla's ears widened toward shouting coming from down the hall. There goes the kids again. She shook her head. They knew how to play nice until those things came along. Ellen came back with a kettle and a cloth. Jasper invents some great things, Ellen said, but sometimes I wish he didn't make those noisemakers pouring in the steaming water. I'll go check on them, Carla said, and strode out of the room. Straight from over the fire, Ellen said, swishing the water around him with her tail. Taking the soap, she started washing his hair. Did you have a son? Sinya asked. Ellen stopped scrubbing. Yes. Just last month he was taken, she said, pouring water on his head from her hands. I don't want to replace him. You're not. That was just my father not understanding. The sound of arguing voices traveled down the hall when the kids stopped and peered in. Talon scowled at him. This is what an animal at the zoo must feel like, Sinya thought. I don't think he cares to be gawked at, Carla's voice said from behind them, moving them along. I'm sorry for our children's behavior. For everyone. We've never seen a human. Ellen held out a cloth to dry him. I'm sure things will be better after you've gotten sleep. Maybe I'll wake up in my own bed, Sinya thought. Sinya moved down the hallway wearing a cloak Ellen had gotten for him. In the morning I'll wash your clothes, she said. I'll also have Avi take that water out of the hole and put more in. She held the curtain open for him. Leroy, William, Abigail, Talon and Carla were on the bench, watching TV, or the vision box as they called it. Dottie sat at the table reading. What were you yelling about? Ellen asked. Carla and the three children turned while Dottie put her book down. They called me a crybaby, Talon said. Well, you are, Dottie stated. We wanted to try a song but you whined how you didn't like it. Then you started yelling and crying. Talon, you do not yell and cry to get your way, Ellen said. I wasn't crying, Talon said in a huff. Why is he wearing my cloak? Because I'm going to wash his clothes tomorrow. Can you fix your cot so Sinya can sleep tonight? Ellen headed to the kitchen and began to pull out pots from the cupboard. Does he have to sleep in my room? I just arranged my animals. Now, Ellen said while Carla smacked Talon's leg. She obeyed reluctantly. Sinya sat next to Dottie, who couldn't take her eyes off of him until Carla clapped her hands. We do not stare, young lady. Dottie bowed her head and began to twirl her tail around her finger. We also do not play with our tail either. Dottie went back to her book. What book you reading? Sinya asked. Dottie put it down. Tall Tales of Humans. Sinya laughed. That's one I never heard of. Talon came back down announcing it's ready. You want me to stay? Carla asked Ellen. If not, my kids have homework to do. Her kids begged to stay over, but she held up a hand to forestall further protest. Stop it. You're all in enough trouble as it is for calling Talon names. But when Ellen dismissed Carla's offer, she led her kids up the ladder. I'll see you tomorrow at school if I survive, Talon called. Ellen cleared her throat and her daughter's smile vanished and she sat on the bench. When their supper of beef and corn was over, and the girls' homework and bath done, Ellen took Sinya upstairs followed by her daughters and led him into a bedroom. In the dark, Sinya could see 3 short shelves around the room filled with toys such as wooden balls, dolls dressed in cowboy hats and boots. On a dresser sat a collection of stuffed animals neatly in a row. Talon took a mouse from this collection and went to her bed. Ellen laid Sinya on the cot and spread a blanket over him. "Try to get some sleep. We'll see what to do about finding how to get you home in the morning," Ellen said, tucking him in. "If you need anything, Talon is right here and she'll come get me. You better not get my cloak dirty." Turning to her daughter, she said, "You also get to sleep and don't worry about your cloak." Talon took her cloak off and laid down on her bed. Ellen kissed Talon, then closed the door behind her. After a minute, Talon spoke, "I'd like to see you do better in the band." "What?" Sinya asked. "You heard that?" "Yes." Sinya licked his lips. "Sorry. Can't believe I'm saying sorry to a dream." It took a while before Sinya fell asleep. But when he did, he dreamt he stood outside in a field. Dark figures surrounded him with drawn guns. A tall woman stood next to him. The figures aimed guns at him and the woman, with her own gun drawn toward the shadower figures. She shoved Sinya to the side and he screamed as he saw red streaks fire at the woman while a light engulfed him. He sat up, gasping for air. Looking across from him in the dark room, Sinya didn't see a form of Talon in her bed. Hearing a creak of the door, Sinya pulled the covers to his neck. "Who are they?" he wondered. Sinya's breathing became heavy once again. But then, seeing the shadow slip under the covers, his breath became steady. "Talon. Did you finally wake yourself?" she asked. "You were moaning so loud I couldn't get to sleep." "Sorry. Where were you?" "That's none of your concern. I have school in the morning, so good night." Sinya tried to relax and swallowed. "This is just a dream. I'm still in my own house, right? That's it. Tomorrow, I'll be in my own house."